Let's start this final session with one last meditation. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. The breathing flowing naturally and effortlessly. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. We all want to be happy. And we all want to be free of suffering. And it often seems to us as if the source of our happiness and the source of our suffering is out there in the world. And as a result, one of the main methods we tend to use to try to find happiness and overcome suffering is that we try to manipulate the things around us. We try to attract people, places, and things that seem to be the source of our happiness. And we try to push away or avoid people, places, and things that seem to be the source of our suffering. however, is this an effective strategy? Using this strategy, are we getting any closer to finding genuine happiness and overcoming suffering? No matter how hard we try to control and manipulate the things around us, we still seem to encounter suffering. And we're still chasing after that elusive happiness. All that we're really achieving by using this strategy is that we are trapping ourselves in the hope-fear cycle. Hoping for pleasant experiences and fearing or worrying about unpleasant experiences. And if we don't get the things we want, we often become very frustrated. And even if we do get the things we want, they never really fully satisfy us, and we simply end up craving for more. And we often end up with a lot of dissatisfaction or disappointment when things don't live up to our expectations. So what's the solution? According to Buddhism, we're simply looking in the wrong place. What would happen if we instead turned our attention to our own mind? What would happen if we began to cultivate more mindfulness, cultivate a more calm, clear, and focused mind? And what would happen if we could begin to see things more clearly and accurately without projecting or distorting what we apprehend? And instead of reacting to things out of old habits, we could begin to respond in ways more conducive to our own and others' happiness. And what would happen if we could begin to reduce and eliminate our mental afflictions such as craving and attachment, anger and jealousy, fear and anxiety, and so forth? And we began to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for ourselves and others. And what would happen if we could begin to see difficult situations in our life not as problems or obstacles, but rather as opportunities for growth and development? So let's set a positive motivation. A motivation wishing to discover practical methods to overcome our mental afflictions and suffering, and to find genuine happiness and inner well-being. And we can extend our motivation out to also include others, also wishing to help those around us to overcome mental afflictions and suffering, and to find that genuine happiness and well-being. And we can dedicate all of our time and efforts here this weekend toward that goal. The goal of everyone overcoming suffering and finding genuine happiness and well-being. And then release all appearances and allow the mind to come to rest. Resting in awareness. Resting in that inner purity of mind. Which is in the nature of loving kindness and compassion. let's have a look at this last page of the text here now. So we're on the top of page 13. It says, through sustaining Mahamudra by riding the horse of shamatha in that way. So sustaining Mahamudra, of course, here is, we're talking about Sutra Mahamudra. So sustaining Mahamudra means to sustain our experience and realization of emptiness by riding on the horse of shamatha. It says, when a concentration imbued with the bliss of physical and mental pliancy is attained by the force of analysis focused on emptiness, then the heat level of the path of preparation is attained. So this is describing a particular stage of the path to enlightenment based on Mahamudra practice. So to expand on that a little bit, we'll use that Mahayana path chart towards the back of your handouts, your booklet. So let's sort of have a look at some of the main points there. So this is often the standard model that is used at the sutra level of practice in Mahayana to describe the stages we go through on the way to enlightenment. And it's a 5-stage model called the 5 paths. So we see here at the beginning of the first path, which is called path of accumulation, underneath there's number 2, and it says uncontrived renunciation and bodhicitta. So remember, this is the path to enlightenment. So remember, we saw very briefly yesterday that the entry point is when we cultivate that aspiration of bodhicitta. So once we have cultivated that aspiration of bodhicitta, we enter the path. So that marks the entrance to the path. And of course it says uncontrived bodhicitta, which means that now, of course, if we think about things, and we could for a little while, for a few moments, maybe have this aspiration, I want to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of others. That's called contrived bodhicitta. We have to make effort for it to come up. And usually it's pretty weak and pretty quickly it goes. But if we keep cultivating that and strengthening that, we'll get to the point where this aspiration of bodhicitta, the aspiration for enlightenment for the benefit of others, just naturally and spontaneously arises throughout the day. That's uncontrived bodhicitta. Once we've cultivated that, we're now called a bodhisattva. And the first stage of the path here is called path of accumulation. And this word accumulation here means we're accumulating or working on the 2 main wings of practice of wisdom and compassion. So we're doing a lot of virtuous, compassionate activities, but also we're working a lot on wisdom, this wisdom of emptiness. And here, at the beginning, we have achieved shamatha already. And so here, then, when we are practicing this vipassana practice of emptiness, whether we're using Mahamudra or looking for the person, whatever approach we're using, I think it mentioned earlier that we need to alternate. That we shamatha, then we investigate. If the investigation disturbs the mind too much, we go back to shamatha. So we're alternating shamatha vipassana. But then, as the text says, that the last page of the text says at the beginning there, it said, when a concentration imbued with the bliss of physical mental appliance is attained by the force of analysis focused on meditation, then the heat level of path of preparation is attained. So what that means is that on this path of accumulation, we're alternating some shamatha, then investigating, back to shamatha. because every time we investigate that, up disturbs the balance of the mind a little bit, so we go backwards and forwards. But then at some point, that investigation won't unbalance, it will enhance, they'll become unified. And that's where we see here, number 4, it says, union of calm abiding and special insight observing emptiness, or in other words, union of shamatha and vipassana observing emptiness. So that is here. So then we have shamatha and vipassana now become unified. And then we enter the path of preparation. But still, on the path of preparation, as with accumulation and earlier, if we are having an experience or realization of emptiness, then in that meditation, while we're having that experience or realization, it's conceptual, meaning there's a sense, me the meditator, experiencing this thing, emptiness. So there still seems to be this subject-object duality there. So it's a conceptual experience or conceptual realization. The word preparation here means we're preparing now for our first direct experience of emptiness. So what's happening over this section of the path here is we continue to meditate on emptiness and we are deepening that realization. And so while we're moving along here, this sense of duality, the sense of me, the meditator, and emptiness, the object that I'm realizing, that starts to collapse. And eventually it completely collapses, and that's when we enter here, the third path, the path of seeing. Seeing means seeing or directly realizing emptiness. And when we directly realize emptiness, then in that experience, it's completely non-conceptual. In that experience, there's no sense of me. There's just the experience of emptiness. And the analogy often given here is it's said it's like water poured into water. And when we come to this first direct realization of emptiness, we become known as what's called an Arya. And of course here we're on a bodhisattva, on the Mahayana path, so we become an Arya bodhisattva. So an Arya is anyone who has previously directly realized emptiness. Prior to path of seeing, preparation, accumulation, and even before, our experience or realization of emptiness is not strong enough to start to wipe out mental afflictions. It is strong enough to subdue it a little bit. So you may have noticed that even now, any of you who've had a little taste of emptiness, you may have noticed a little bit after the meditation for a short time, maybe you're a bit more calm, mental afflictions not so strong, you felt a little bit more connected to others, more kindness, compassion. That's because of the experience of emptiness. It sort of keeps the lid a little bit on that, but then it'll sort of end and back to normal. And similarly here on path of accumulation, path of preparation, particularly here on path of preparation, that conceptual realization of emptiness very much outside of meditation can keep the lid on the mental afflictions. You'll notice that mental afflictions hardly arise, and if they do, they're very weak and they last a very short time. But we haven't started to eliminate yet. That only happens when a direct realization of emptiness on path of seeing. But one direct realization of emptiness is not strong enough to wipe out all mental afflictions. So what we have to do over the next stage, called the path of meditation, is continually realize emptiness directly again and again and again and keep wiping out more and more ignorance, mental afflictions. And this path of meditation is usually divided into 9 parts, and together with the path of seeing, those 10 sections are called the 10 grounds or 10 bhumis in Sanskrit. And what we see here in this chart is that by the end of the 7th ground, we have now managed to wipe out all ignorance, all mental afflictions, and therefore all suffering. So we actually have achieved nirvana here. We've managed to get rid of these afflictive obscurations. But still, we have these subtle stains in our mind that cause this mistaken dualistic appearance. They're very difficult to get rid of. And that's what we're getting rid of over the last 3 stages, 8, 9 and 10. And at the end of the 10th ground, we sit down for the last time, meditating on emptiness. And remember, up until this point, as we saw in the text, when you're directly realizing emptiness, the only thing appearing at that time is emptiness. Nothing else is appearing. So up until the 10th ground, we are alternating between emptiness and world, appearance of the world, backwards and forwards. But now at the end of the 10th ground, we sit down the last time, directly realize emptiness, eliminate that last subtle stain in the mind, and then next moment, we're still in meditation, the whole world appears to us. And then we achieve enlightenment here. So someone who's achieved enlightenment is directly realizing emptiness and seeing the phenomenal world at the same time. I mean, what that sort of means for us is a bit hard to really imagine. But that's the end result. So that's the enlightened state there. There's probably a lot more to be said here, but maybe that's enough for now. Does anyone have any questions about anything on that chart? Because there's a little bit more in the text I have to cover to finish.
Nirvana is in the 9th stage.
Sorry, the what?
Nirvana is not in 7, it's in 9.
In what? Yeah, Nirvana is number 9, but it's at the end of the 7th stage.
What exactly do you accumulate between the bodhicitta and the union?
Sorry, where are you talking now?
Between bodhicitta and
Path of accumulation?
Yeah,
Yeah, so accumulation here, I mean, we talk about the 2 wings of wisdom and compassion, but often when we talk about the 2 accumulations, we're talking about wisdom and merit. Merit just means the result of virtue. So we're really, all the way along, we are doing compassionate, virtuous activities, and we're working on our wisdom. So we're practicing both of those, because we need 2 wings to move along the path. One wing is not really going to go very well. If we're just doing emptiness or we're just doing compassionate activities, it's not so effective.
So, and the union, which
the union of shamatha and vipassana is at the end of path of accumulation. Before that, we have to alternate. Investigation, shamatha, vipassana, shamatha, and then they become unified. So let's finish the text now. So that's the standard model that you'll see in the Mahayana. But here in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, they often have a little bit different model. And we see that in the next paragraph. It says, some earlier Kagyu masters presented the path of Mahamudra in terms of 4 yogas. And these 4 yogas is a model that was developed by Genpopa, who was the founder of the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. And the 4 yogas here is called the yoga of single-pointedness, due to observing the mind single-pointedly. The yoga